to Falcon Central Radio on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I'm Aaron Freeman, with my co-host Scott Karasik, and we are joined this week by the Falcoholic himself, Dave Choate, and he's going to stick with us for a little bit and talk a little bit about the Atlanta Falcons. We'll be reviewing the Week 8 game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which happened to be a loss, the second of the season for the Falcons. We'll preview their Week 9 game against the San Francisco 49ers. And as usual, we'll answer your mailbag questions at the end of the show. We got plenty of those, so let's kick things off. The Falcons made a practice squad move today. I don't know if you guys have any comment on C.J. Goodwin or LaRon Byrd, but if you do, I guess now is the time to share it. But if you don't, we can jump into the Bucks game.
I'm going to be honest with you, I've never seen C.J. Goodwin or LaRon Byrd play in a game to where I was like, oh, that guy stands out to me. So I'm going to guess their bodies.
I have no opinion worth sharing.
There you go. I know C.J. Goodwin is fast. He has like a 4.4 40 and a 40-inch vertical, so he's fast and athletic. Okay, there you go, folks. There's your C.J. Goodwin update of the year, because I think that's probably the last time we'll talk about him. Let's talk about the Bucks game. Overtime loss. The Falcons started slow, came back in the end. It looked like it was going to be similar to the Redskins game where the Falcons would pull it out. They did not pull it out. So what were your guys' big takeaways from this week's game?
Turnovers. Falcons can't keep shooting themselves in the foot like this. It's just, it's just frustrating. The Falcons are way too good as a team this year to give teams games away. This was like the Saints game all over again. They totally gave the Bucks the game. If they score on just one of those red zone trips if they kick a field goal on a first down on one of those red zone trips, they win the game.
Dave, what were your thoughts on it?
You know, it's just what we've been seeing over the last month. I mean, this team went from being, looking fairly disciplined, looking like they had things figured out, to just way too many mistakes. And, I mean, I'm inclined to chalk some of this up to fluke. I don't think that Mike Person and James Stone can keep doing this, keep snapping this terribly. I don't think you're going to have these botched handoffs. I don't think you're going to have Ryan, whether Jacob Tamme didn't come back or he threw it into triple coverage intentionally, any way you slice it, these are just so dumb, all of these mistakes, that I just have to believe that they can't keep happening for my own sanity's sake. But I think that, it's not an exaggeration to say the difference between an 8-0 Falcons team, which we'd all be over the moon for, and the 6-2 team that a lot of people are worried about, it is the turnovers. I think it's as simple as that.
Okay. I don't have anything else to really add to that. I guess the main thing that frustrated me more than the turnovers is sort of how conservative we were offensively, and by conservative I mean how we didn't throw the ball down the field. And I feel like when we were good in the first part of the season, we were getting a bunch of big plays, big chunk yards. Julio Jones was doing things. Hankerson was doing things. Devontae did, had that great catch against the Cowboys in the second half, which was a big spark for that game. Or no, at the end of the first half, I can't remember exactly what it was. But it's one of those things where, now we've gotten back to sort of this dink and dunk offense where, Julio is basically running the ball, running 8 yards down the field, running an 8-yard slant. And, I feel like this is really, we saw this in the Giants game, and then they finally took a deep shot with Julio, and it was the play of the game, besides the Corey Bierman sack strip. I always have to give Corey Bierman love on the show. But it's just one of those things where I said it then, it feels like when you throw short passes to Julio, you're doing the defense's job for them, because they're so afraid of the deep ball that if you're just going to do short stuff, you're kind of minimizing his impact. And I do feel like we're missing Hankerson. I wouldn't call Hankerson a deep threat, but I do feel like he's an intermediate threat. And it's just one of those things where they just seem to settle too much. And I feel like we need to get some sort of explosive element back in the offense. And if we can do that, then and stop turning the ball over, things will be good again. But, I don't know when that's going to happen. I hope it happens this week against the 49ers. But I've been waiting for this for a couple of weeks now, and we haven't really seen it happen. So I don't know how much more patience I can show. I mean, it's just I don't know, but we'll see how it goes. Like we're complaining about a 6-2 team, so it's like first world problems, I guess. But it's a little frustrating when it's like you feel like it's like they're this close to being better, as you say 8-0. So it's like I don't know. You guys got it?
I think it's one of those. Yeah, I think it's one of those things too, where it really does. It hurts because the margin's so small in both of the losses. It's NFC South teams. It's Buccaneers. It's like you should beat. Just makes it even worse. I mean, you come into the Saints game. Okay, Washington was a little bit shaky. You don't feel too bad about it, and then you lose to the Saints, and then a couple weeks later you lose to the Bucks. I understand, even if it is frustrating, some of the almost giving up out there from fans. I understand it. It's very frustrating to watch this team fall short the way they have, and I agree with you. I think seeing this offense kind of limited, kind of one-dimensional, at least when it comes to the passing game, is really frustrating.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that we struggled against the Titans as well. That was another team that we were expecting, we're just going to roll. And now we have another game coming up against the 49ers. But it's like, okay, this is our rebound game. It's like all the conditions are here. We'll talk about this a little later, but it's like everything seems to be going the Falcons' way with the quarterback situation in San Francisco. Like they just look at a team that's dead in the water. And what happens if they struggle again this week? It's like the Titans and the 49ers are arguably probably the two worst teams on our schedule. And if we struggle to beat those teams, then what is it going to say about when we start playing in Carolina and the Vikings and whatnot, and ultimately, as we hope, get into the playoffs? I don't know. You just kind of hope that they get out of this funk that they're in and start playing good football like they did at the beginning of the season, and it'll just give us a little bit more things to be optimistic. I won't be optimistic about them because I'm Mr. Negative, but the rest of you guys can at least be optimistic, and I can just kind of grumble in the corner somewhere and be like, but
like you always do.
Yeah, pretty much. So you got anything else to add about this Buccaneers game? Like, Scott and I did this show a couple of weeks ago with the Saints, and we were like, okay, let's move on from the Saints loss as quickly as possible. Let's forget it. But do you guys have anything else you want to say about this Bucs game that stood out to you? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers. They are not good. They benched their starting quarterback for Colin Kaepernick for Blaine Gabbert. The nice bulletin board material we saw earlier today, where apparently the 49ers wanted to bench Kaepernick last week, but then they wanted to wait till they had a home game against a quote-unquote weak defense by facing the Falcons this week to give, I guess, Gabbert the best possible chance of success as opposed to facing a formidable Rams pass rush last week on the road. So I guess what are your guys' thoughts on the Falcons beating a weak defense and whether or not this is a game where Gabbert can have success?
I mean, I don't think the Falcons have a weak defense by any means. I think they've got a pretty strong defense. Can Gabbert have success in the NFL? Probably not.
Okay.
I mean, if we're talking like the CFL, maybe Gabbert could have success, but we're talking about NFL caliber athletes. And even if the Falcons don't have a great defense, which I would argue they've got a pretty good defense, like in that 11 to 15 range defense, based on, stats and performance and everything else. The thing that would bring them over the top is if the pass rush finally got going and was getting 5, 6 sacks a game. That'd be great. That'd make this defense go over the top. But the Falcons have a pretty good defense. So when Blaine Gabbert comes in, it wouldn't shock me to see the Falcons allow maybe 200 yards this week. Maybe. Or, they sub Colin Kaepernick in at the end of the first quarter. Like, this shit's going way too overboard. We're already down 28-0 from the 3 pick sixes and something crazy. Like, Blaine Gabbert is so ridiculously horrible. He's what the average Joe would look like playing quarterback in the NFL. If we happen to have a 6'5" frame and weigh 210 pounds, he's what we would look like playing in the NFL. He is that bad. He just happens to be a big white guy, so NFL teams are going to pick him up and put him on the team.
Wrong words there. Dave, can you follow that up?
Blaine Gabbert is hot garbage. He is, I could keep going with that string. I won't. But, this is kind of a baffling decision to me because Colin Kaepernick is as poorly as he's played this year. He's got to give you more than Blaine Gabbert. I can't see what the end game is here. I mean, besides just throwing Gabbert in and hoping, I guess, over the last few years that he's absorbed some football acumen somehow from the players around him. I mean, he's just not good enough. So, to me, either the 49ers have some brilliant plan that nobody knows about, or Occam's razor, they don't know what they're doing. They're clutching at straws. And this is just a terrible, terrible matchup for them. I think the Falcons can't get a great pass rush, but their defense is good enough to stop Gabbert and, the poo-poo platter at running back. I mean, if they don't have Carlos Hyde, we're talking about 2 street free agents and an undrafted free agent. You combine that, it's just, I can't see that offense doing anything. It's going to be on the Falcons to kind of beat themselves, I think.
Basically, I think the only thing that I could see them doing, and the only reason why I could see them doing this, is they have a bye right after they play the Falcons. And I could see this kind of being the, Colin, you've taken so much abuse, we're just going to take it off of you for a little bit, for 2 weeks. After these 2 weeks, get your ass back in there, you're the quarterback the rest of the way. But instead of throwing you to the wolves yet again and putting you in a situation to fail yet again, we're going to take you out, smack you around a little bit on the sidelines to show you where this guy's screwing up so you can see how much worse he is than you and realize that he is on the field instead of you. So get your shit together. That's basically what I think they're doing. This is his come to Jesus meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I think the good thing if you're being optimistic for the 49ers is Kaepernick is probably the worst quarterback in the league based off his play. So you're probably at this point, well, you can't really get any worse than playing Gabbert. We'll see if that comes to fruition. But it does feel like this is a game where if the Falcons' pass rush is going to come alive, this is going to be the easiest game for them to do it. They're facing a quarterback who has, phenomenal issues with dealing with pressure. He's the poster child for a quarterback that is skittish in the pocket. They have a bad offensive line. Joe Staley is not having as good a year as he normally does, but he's still Joe Staley. But outside of Joe Staley, their offensive line is pretty much a mess. And you feel like, okay, even if Joe Staley puts Vic Beasley on lockdown this week, you feel like Adrian Claiborne and Babineau and Schofield should be able to feast on Gabbert this week. And because they're down to like their 4th-string running back, which is a noted Falcons killer by the name of Pierre Thomas, but that was probably the last time he killed the Falcons was probably 2-3 years ago. So he's a little over the hill at this point. you're basically like, don't get beat by Torrey Smith. Basically, that's really the one thing that I guess could worry you about the 49ers. Especially if Trufant and Alfred are injured this week. We don't really know right now what their status is, but it doesn't seem like it's that dire an issue, at least from what I've heard. But it's like, this is a game where the Falcons defense should be able to do what it wants to do and really sort of dictate this game. And as long as the offense isn't just giving away points like we've seen the last couple of weeks, it should be an easy win for the Falcons. But we thought that way against the Titans, and it's one of those things where it's like, the last couple of games, these should have been pretty easy wins, and it wasn't. So it always seems like the Falcons seem to find a way to make it hard on themselves. But I'm hoping this is the week where they don't do that, and we really get to see this team sort of feast on a weak opponent, like we saw against Houston. And, this should be a game that should go that way. But, I don't know how you guys feel about I think we all kind of agree that this defense should have a great game against the 49ers offense. But what do you feel about the Falcons offense going against the 49ers defense?
It's probably that 49ers been in years. They've been very, very poor against the run. And I do think Devontae Freeman's going to stretch them out through the zone blocking scheme. I think this is probably the best matchup for Freeman. I don't know what to explain, like how to explain what's going on in San Francisco. They used to be a defense that wouldn't allow more than like 3.8, 3.7 yards a carry, and this year they're allowing 4.2, which is a massive decline for a defense that's as quick as they are. And they really haven't played any team that's got a great rushing attack. They've played the Vikings, who have, they got Adrian Peterson, but he wasn't really back. The Steelers ran all over them. The Cardinals ran all over them. The Packers ran all over them. The Giants ran all over them. The Ravens did the same. I think the only two teams that really have a great rushing attack are the Seahawks and the Rams. And obviously the Rams are going to run all over them with how Gurley's been playing and with how Trey Mason's been playing. And obviously the Seahawks are going to run all over them with how Lynch has been playing and Thomas Rawls. So I think the Falcons could have a situation where they run the ball 35 times this week and they're passing it maybe 30 times this week, minimizing Ryan's impact on the game and just milking the clock as much as possible. We might see a couple of Tevin Coleman massive runs where he just breaks free in the open field because they're awful in the open field right now. Their issue isn't, missing angles. Their issue is missing tackles. This defense looks very Falcons 2014-esque or Falcons 2013-esque, where they just can't stop the run.
I think anytime you're using, Falcons 2013 or 2014-esque, you're talking about some pretty low lows defensively. I think, San Francisco's got more talent than that, but I'm not convinced that they're well coached enough or that the unit is playing well enough to really slow the Falcons down. I think that, again, the Falcons are going to be the only ones that can limit themselves. I think if they turn the ball over, if they insist on passing more than they should, which I think they have done a couple of weeks here, that's going to be the thing that's going to kill them. I don't think you can afford to turn the ball over at the same clip that you have been and just assume that San Francisco can't accidentally take advantage of that. I think that your defense, your offense, has to be good enough and has to just hold on to the football. I think run the ball, like Scott said, as much as you can and try not to put it into their hands and you'll probably be fine. I think that's really what it comes down to. Just don't make any mistakes or many mistakes. It should be an easy win.
Yeah, I feel like, I guess, yeah. I don't, yeah. I'm with you, Dave. I feel like everything you just said. I was trying to think of something I could add to that, but yeah, I'm with you. It should be another easy win for the Falcons. So
Unless
there.
they do what they did against the Titans and screw it up in the red zone, or what they did against the Bucks and screw it up in the red zone, or what they did against the Saints and screw it up in the red zone. The Falcons' red zone woes are because they turn it over in the red zone. If they just stop choking and stop turning the ball over in the red zone, and even scoring field goals would be fine. Like 27 points off turnovers the last 2 weeks because of turnovers in the red zone. Like, at least score a field goal, because a field goal is acceptable as opposed to just giving them the ball back.
I disagree with you. So, Dave, can you answer a mailbag question with us?
Absolutely.
Unless you guys got something else to add about the 49er game. I think we summed it up pretty well. All right, our first question comes from @CedricEmail. He asks, are the corners playing?
To my knowledge, they should be. I think they're going to be limited in practice for the first couple of days this week, both of them. But from my understanding, they're at least going to be playing a little bit. Dave might know a little bit more about this.
From what and this is just guesswork on my part because we don't really have anything concrete to go on at this point. I think that Trufant's going to play. I have my doubts about Alfred. I think anytime you're talking about a groin injury, that's the kind of thing that can linger. It's the kind of thing that can be easily aggravated. I think they like what Collins has been doing. I think they like Adams well enough that, they're not going to be desperate. If one of these guys has to miss the game, my gut says Alfred's going to be the guy that's more likely, and that they might sit him out if they fear there's any kind of risk. So I'd say 75-80% chance you'll see Trufant, 40% chance you'll see Alfred.
I'll go with you. I thought the same exact thing. It sounds like Trufant's probably good to go. He might be limited in practice, as Scott said. Again, this is speculation because I don't have anything concrete to go off of. But it does seem like Alfred's injury is a little bit more worrisome. I haven't heard anything that it's a major issue, but as Dave said, groin injury, anytime you see groin, back, hamstring, or concussion, it gets a little iffy with guys going to be playing the next week. So, we'll see how that goes. But, yeah, I would probably bet more money that Trufant plays than Alfred does. But, they may wind up both playing, so we'll see how it goes. All right, BChapX17 asks, Beasley does better on the left side. You think they eventually keep him there?
I mean, I wouldn't be against it, especially if he's a strong side linebacker / drops down, puts his hand in the dirt on passing downs. I think that's eventually his long-term role. But who's going to play Leo? That or he's going to have to gain 10, 15 pounds, and he could potentially be a Robert Mathis type. Or they could just switch to a 3-4 or glorify 3-4, just have Beasley stand up the whole time. Eventually, though, Beasley's going to have to gain 10 pounds and gain the strength and the power that comes with 10 pounds of muscle. That's really what he has to do. Regardless of if he goes strong side or weak side, that's what he's got to do.
Yeah, I think I think the role he's in now, I think that, chiefly playing the Leo. To me, that's still where he kind of belongs. But I do agree with Scott. I think that, he's going to have to build up a little strength, build up a little muscle anyways, regardless of whether he's going to move or not. And I think that, that's not going to happen this season. I think it's premature to say they're going to move him here, they're going to move him there. I think they're going to rely on him to be their top pass rusher for years to come. He just needs to get better and stronger.
Yeah, I think Beasley, you'll probably see them use Beasley more on the left side down the road, just to sort of get better matchups and whatnot. I think a lot of it has to do with sort of, I guess, this is an ugly term, but the sort of vanilla scheme that Dan Quinn runs, which is, guys do what they do, and, there's not a whole lot of variation in it. So, as long as he's playing that Leo spot, he's going to pretty much line up on the weak side, which is usually going to be against the left tackle. I think some of it has to do with the fact, though, that Beasley's the only guy on the team right now that has the speed that can beat left tackles. And so if you were to switch Schofield onto that side, you're basically negating anything that Schofield's going to do as a pass rusher. And even though Beasley would be better for it, because he would get a weaker matchup, it's kind of like I'd rather have Beasley, doing what he can do against left tackles and Schofield feasting on right tackles than Schofield doing nothing against left tackles and Beasley feasting on left tackles. I think the Falcons basically, you'll probably see Beasley get a lot more reps on playing on the left side if and when the Falcons get another big time speed rusher that can, smoke left tackles. But until then, you're probably just going to see, they'll mix it in every now and then, but it's not going to be a major part of their sub packages. All right. Dustin asks, I know everyone's focusing on the negatives at Atlanta right now, but what are some of the positives that you see so far? I'll start, I guess. Me, Mr. Being Mr. Negative. I think the positives, they have balance on offense. They have Julio Jones. Their offensive line is a good run blocking unit. They're not bad in pass protection. So you don't feel like, oh no, Matt Ryan's going to die today, like we've seen in past offenses. They don't give up big plays, and they stop the run. And I think those are all things that you want, when you're looking at teams that are going to be playoff contenders. Those are all things that you see commonly in playoff contenders, So, yeah, I think there's a lot of positives that they do.
I think, there's a few positives in Atlanta right now. I think, Nick Williams is scrappy and gritty. I think that, Taron Ward doesn't fall down all the time on the field, and, things of that nature. But, I really do think, I don't think everybody's focusing on the negative. I think it's just hard to look past the negative right now. And I think that, on balance, this team is a playoff contender. They've got a chance at least to make some noise if they can get this thing figured out. And I think we know they've got, real talent at quarterback, real talent at running back, wide receiver, some talent at tight end with Jacob Tamme, which is a nice change of pace. And, the defense is leaps and bounds ahead of where it was a year ago. I think that there's enough improvement here that you got to feel good about this team this year and in the future, even if right now all we're worried about is, are they going to fumble and throw the game away? So
I'll have to agree with y'all on the balance aspect. This running game is the best we've seen since, I want to say, 2006. Like, they will probably, if they don't screw it up, which it's the Falcons, they could very easily screw it up, but if they don't screw it up, they could very easily put up 2,000 yards this year at the pace they're going. They've already got 1,008 through the first 8 games. Freeman and Coleman look like great complements to each other. Coleman looks like a good change of pace to Freeman when Freeman needs that breather. And could break off a couple 80-yard runs, and no one would question it, and they'd be like, "Oh, hey, good job, Freeman, or good job, Coleman. Now Freeman, go back in there and be the grinder." So, the running game is a beautiful thing. The offensive line is run blocking extremely well. They still have a couple lapses in pass protection, but compared to last year, they're vastly improved. The tight end situation is vastly improved. Even Toilolo, who used to be drop city, hasn't dropped a pass this year. So, yeah, he hasn't dropped a pass this year. He's been overthrown a couple times, but he hasn't dropped a pass this year. Tamme has dropped a couple, but he still looked really good. And this past week, he looked like he was possessed by the ghost of Tony G. Julio is Julio. And yeah, the Falcons need a number 2 receiver to step up. Maybe that'll be Justin Harmon. Maybe that'll be Hankerson when he comes back. But they've got talent on offense. The defense is playing a lot better than it has. The pass rush is vastly improved from what it was last year. Last year they had 7 sacks to this point and hit the quarterback 20 times total to this point. This year they've hit the quarterback over 55 times. So yeah, they're not getting the sack numbers, but they're putting a pounding on quarterbacks. Eventually, those hits become sacks. Later in the year, as offensive lines start to wear down, those hits will become sacks. As they start playing teams that just have worse talent, or as teams start losing their players and losing their talented left tackles, those hits become sacks. And as they start playing quarterbacks that just hold on to the ball too long, like Blaine Gabbert, those hits become sacks. So it wouldn't shock me if this week the Falcons had 7, 8, maybe even 9 sacks just because Blaine Gabbert doesn't know when to throw the damn ball away the way any competent NFL starter would. Even Jameis knew when to throw the ball away. If Jameis wasn't Roethlisberger Part 2, where you couldn't take him down, the Falcons would have had 5 sacks this week because he held on to the ball too long. So the pass rush is good. The run defense looks good. The coverage looks better. Yeah, there's some issues at strong safety. Yeah, there's some issues, at the second level with the linebackers. Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither was a good defense. So a much improved Falcons team in Dan Quinn's first year has a lot of people excited for future years. And I like the fact that people are mad at Team 6-2 because they shot themselves in the foot in those 2 losses.
All right, we got another from Dustin. He asks, up to this point in the season, do you still believe that Atlanta is a playoff contender?
I don't see a way where they don't make the playoffs unless someone huge goes down. They're 6-2, heading into a game where they should easily win 7-2. That means they got to win 3 of their last 7 to make it in. They still have a game against New Orleans. They got 2 games against the Panthers. A game against the Bucks, and a game against the Jags. And then they get the Colts and the Vikings. I see at least 4 wins out of that whole group.
Yeah, I think they have to be considered a playoff contender. I think as poorly as this team is playing, they're still losing these games or winning, narrowly. They're keeping things close, and they're hanging in. And they've shown that they can blow teams out this year. They've shown they can come back from a major deficit, bring it to overtime, win the game, depending on which week you're looking at. So I think that given the talent on the roster, given the strength of the coaching, given the schedule and where they are right now, they might not make the playoffs, but it would be difficult for me to predict a scenario in which that happens unless, as Scott said, there's a major injury. Or what we're seeing now with turnovers is going to be the status quo the rest of the way. I think that's the only way they could possibly miss out entirely.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself, but I think part of the reason why I'm negative or critical of the team now is because I see them as a playoff contender, and I don't simply judge them simply by, they're better than last year's team, and that's all that matters. It's really looking at this team because of the 5-0 start and saying, okay, is this going to be another year like we saw under Mike Smith where they win 10 or 11 games and then they play in the playoffs and they get beat by the Cardinals or the Packers or the Giants and just kind of lay an egg and they get exposed for being not as good as their record said that they were. And I guess that's probably because we experienced that multiple times under Mike Smith. I think that's one of the reasons why, I come off as negative about this team. I'm not negative about them. I really feel like, whether they finish this year 12-4 or 8-8, it doesn't really matter to me. I always thought this was a year for evaluation where, Dan Quinn's installing his defense, and Kyle Shanahan's installing his offense. There's obviously some very key players on both sides of the ball that are long-term assets, but there's a lot of guys on this roster that aren't in that mode yet, and they're really trying to find their feet under this new regime. And I do feel like, as Scott said, the best years, better football is ahead of this team than what we're currently seeing. And so it's one of those things where, like, ultimately at the end of the day, I'm fine with whatever the Falcons are, if they are the team that they've been the last 4 games or the team that they were at the beginning of the first 4 games. Either way, it works in my book. Obviously, I'm not going to enjoy watching the team the last couple of weeks as much. So, my tweets won't be as happy-go-lucky on Sundays. But, I think, it's just like they need, you want to see a team that's really, because I think everybody's eyes are on January now. And you want to see a team that's worthy of being, one of those teams that's a true contender and can make the deep run that people want this team to make in the playoffs. And so that's really where the negativity comes from. They need to improve that, and they need to improve this if they want to be get a playoff win, as opposed to the things that they need to do to get to the playoffs. Like, as these guys said, I feel like something devastating has to happen for them not to make the playoffs. But I feel like we still have 8 games to see how things play out, and I'm confident that things will be better than what they are now by the end of the season. But it's just waiting for when that happens. Does it happen this week? Does it happen in week 12? Does it happen in week 16? We'll have to see. But yeah. All right. D-Rock the Party asks, do you think we saw Tammy's ceiling against Tampa Bay, or can he get better going forward?
Tammy's had 2 of the best 3 games of his career in Atlanta this year. He had a 104-yarder this past week, and he had a 100-yarder this week, and he had a 94-yarder earlier in the season, where he was just getting open, creating plays. He's on pace for the best year of his career. And it's weird to see this because Jacob Tammy's 31, 32 years old. I mean, it's not like he's a young guy, but he's putting up the best numbers of his career. He's looking the best he ever has. And I could see him continuing on the same path and eventually being, he might put up 800 yards this year. Because there are some teams on the schedule that just cannot cover tight ends. And the Falcons have to exploit that. And Tammy's showing that he can at least do a Tony Gonzalez imitation. And in the red zone, Toilolo may not be great, but in short yardage on 3rd downs, and in the red zone, he's proven to be at least what Brian Finneran could have been, or what Brian Finneran was late in his career. And that's a big target that can go out there, box out, grab the ball, and come down with it. And that's all you need. And if all Toilolo becomes in the passing game is Brian Finneran, we've gotten a win out of Toilolo.
Yeah, I think, I don't think we've seen Tammy ceiling in the sense that I think he could come away with more yards in a game. I think he could score multiple times in sort of fluky fashion. But I do think that, Tammy is what he is at this point. He's a capable enough guy. He's somebody that's earning Matt Ryan's trust, and, he's not going to be great. He's not going to have a monster game like Julio Jones has on a every other week basis, because he is who he is. He's Jacob Tammey. He's perfectly fine, but I think the offense just needs Jacob Tammey to be perfectly fine, and Matt Ryan's going to keep throwing to him. So I think that we've seen the best out of Tammey in terms of performance is what I'm getting at in a roundabout way, but I think you might see bigger numbers.
I feel like I should say I told you so. I was the first one to
I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
Remember me saying, if I'm wrong, I will gladly be wrong on this one because I want Jacob Tammey to be successful so the Falcons have a competent tight end. Thank you. I'm okay with you doing the I told you so. I'm okay with being wrong on this one. I'll be wrong all day as long as Tammey keeps performing like this.
I'm looking at the numbers right now, and the 10 catch, 103 yards, and 1 touchdown was, from a yardage standpoint, Tammy's best game of his career, second best game of his career. He had a 11 catch, 108-yard game, and 1 touchdown back in 2010 when he was with the Colts. So I think if you're looking at it from that perspective, yeah, that was probably his ceiling. That was his second best game of his career, and he's played over 100 games in his career. So you're probably not going to see too many more, 15 catch, 150-yard games from Jacob Tammey, since he's never really done that. But as both those guys were saying, I do feel like he's still going to be good. But we'll probably look back at the end of the season and say, oh yeah, Tammy was at his best against the Buccaneers, and that was probably his best game of the season. But he'll still be good moving forward.
Even if all he gives is like a 5-catch, 60-yard game every week from here on out, that's still more than anybody's expecting.
Not this guy. All right, guys. I am smart asks, when do you think we'll start to seeing more press coverage?
The Falcons pretty much run the 50-50 press coverage that Dan Quinn ran in Seattle already. I mean, I'm not seeing when they would increase it or decrease it. It all depends on the opponent. It all depends on who the guy is. But, I mean, they run press coverage on guys who normally don't do well against press coverage, and they'll back off a little bit on the guys that don't do well versus off coverage. It's just matchup based more than anything else. They realize who's across from them, what their strengths and weaknesses are. They mix up coverages, they'll mix up zones, they'll mix up man. A lot of times they'll run cover 1 man or they'll run cover 3, and that's basically it. That's Dan Quinn's defense in a nutshell, and they press when they feel like pressing. They press when Marquand Manuel tells them to, They press when Raheem Morris tells them to.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a lot to add to that. I think it really does. It's going to depend by opponent, but as Aaron said earlier, what Dan Quinn is running is a vanilla scheme in the sense that you know what you're getting. So I think you've seen, with a couple of drastic exceptions maybe, again, depending on the opponent, what you're going to see for press coverage. I don't think they're ramping up to it in any way is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of press coverage. I guess if if you equate press coverage to bump and run coverage, then yeah, I guess we haven't played it that much bump and run. But they seem to be in press coverage, at least when I'm paying attention, like 80 to 90% of the time. It's just they're not necessarily jam this guy at the line of scrimmage and don't let him get off the line of scrimmage press coverage sort of stuff. So, yeah, I do feel like we're seeing plenty of press coverage. It's just not sort of the classic way that people think about press coverage when it's just you're mauling a receiver at the line of scrimmage. But, press coverage is basically lining up tight on the line of scrimmage. That's press coverage. All right, we got a couple from @MattStars. His first one is, should we temper our expectations or fix the turnovers we could make a deep playoff run? Okay, so, yeah, I guess he's asking.
Fix the turnovers, can they make a deep playoff run? Is that basically what he's asking?
Yeah, it's a little iffy on the grammar, but we will forgive Matt for that one.
I think any given year, any given team can make a deep playoff run. So get to the tournament and make sure that you play your best football when you're there. If the Falcons aren't playing their best football in October or November, that's okay. As long as they play their best football in January and February, they should be fine. They have to play good enough to get there, and then once they get there, they have to really go balls to the wall. And they're playing pretty well right now, but there's still holes that you can see within the team. And those holes will always be there. There will always be something wrong with this team. No matter how hard, like they could win the Super Bowl, there's still going to be holes on the team. It's how can you minimize those holes? How can you minimize those weaknesses and accentuate the strengths the best? And that's where coaching comes in. That's why Dan Quinn came in and went 6-2 with pretty much the same roster that Mike Smith had last year. Yeah, there's some key guys up front on the defensive line and on the offensive line that changed. But the core of the team is pretty much the same. You've still got, Warlow. You've still got William Moore. You've still got Trufant and Alford on defense. You've still got Babineau causing havoc up front on defense. But the core of the team is the same. The scheme changed completely. And that's why the defense is playing more effectively. The scheme on offense was one they should have ran all last year when they knew they had Devontae Freeman and said, hey, Devontae, you should be the workhorse because Steven Jackson just doesn't have it. So I think they've got the talent to make the deep playoff run, and I think they just need to keep improving every week.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would really add to that is that, it's a cliche, and I'm sure people are already tired of hearing Dan Quinn say this, but, this team's best football is ahead of them. I think that they could not possibly be playing, well, they could possibly, I don't want to jinx that, but, it would be difficult for them to play more sloppy, undisciplined football than they are right now. And I think that, at some point, your luck's going to turn a little bit. You're going to just sharpen things up as you get more comfortable with the scheme you're running, with the players you've added. And I think that, even if it's an incremental bump, even if it's one less turnover a game, this team is going to improve. And I think there's no reason to temper your expectations if you were already thinking playoffs, deep playoff run, whatever it may be. I think it's way too early to do that. I think we got to see over the next couple of games, are they still making the same kind of mistakes? But I suspect they won't.
Yeah, I'm always for tempering expectations because I just like to bring people down. I think the key to a deep playoff run, I really do feel like, and I think I said this on a couple of shows in the past. I really do feel like it's really on Julio's shoulders and Beasley's shoulders. I think if you can get Julio back to where he was at the beginning of the season, then this offense is going to be at its best because, Devontae's been great, but, we know that in January it's really about throwing the football and it's really about being explosive. And this team, historically when Julio went off against Seattle 49ers, we were very close to winning one of those games, and we actually did win one of those games. So again, I think the defense is what they are. For the most part, I really do think if we're going to see big improvement from this defense from here until January, it's going to be because of the pass rush, and it's not going to be because Corey Bierman is suddenly playing better. It's going to be because Vic Beasley is playing better. I think the main thing I was frustrated with under the Mike Smith regime was sort of how they were a low variance team, as some would put it, where you got very consistent effort from them week in and week out during those early years when the team was successful, not the last couple of years. But you got basically the same thing each week, and then when it got to January, they weren't able to raise their ability beyond that. And when you have to, play in the playoffs, you have to play better than what you did in the regular season. And I feel like this team has that potential. We just need to see it. And sometimes I feel like the regular season for the true playoff contenders is like practice for January. You need to practice at the things that you need to do well in the playoffs, which is play good defense, rush the quarterback, generate explosive plays on offense, have balance, and those sorts of things to be successful in January. And I feel like this team is on the verge of that. They just need to start doing it more. So I feel confident that this team is much more capable of making a deep run than some of those Mike Smith coach teams. But again, I think we just need to see more consistency from them before we can really start to get really hyped about the January. But again, it's 8 games away, so we got plenty of time to work up to that.
Yeah, even the team we'll see this week won't be the same team that we'll see come playoffs.
Yeah.
NFL teams are so different from week to week that we just have to hope they continue their improvement.
Yeah. Okay, we got another one from Matt Stars. He asked thoughts on the play calling on third down the last few weeks.
I mean, I wish there would have been more runs, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, there's a couple of complaints I have. That one short yardage thing we saw a couple of weeks ago at the goal line, that was a big complaint. But for the most part, I've been a Falcon fan for so long, and it always seems like there's always been something with the play calling that people complain about. That it's one of those things that's just like whatever. I've complained about play calling for so long that it's just not even worth my time to really complain about it anymore.
The only real complaint is 3rd and 2. Run the ball more. On 3rd and 2, on 3rd and 2 with one of the league's top 5 rushing attacks, you run the ball.
I almost feel like, Shanahan has been guilty about thinking himself a couple of times and just doing something that maybe he thinks the defense isn't going to expect that they're actually expecting, like, throw it across the middle on a quick hitter to Julio Jones. Well, that's not the obvious situation maybe because it's not a run, but who else are you really going to be throwing it to if you're the Falcons on that play? And I think that, they just need to go with what's been working for them, not try to get cute, whatever cute means in the context of the play. And I think that probably does involve less passing on 3rd and short situations.
Yeah. All right, we got one more from Matt Stars. He asks, how do we miss guys like Stephon Diggs in the draft? I'm assuming that's who he's talking about.
Every team misses guys like Stephon Diggs in the draft. Every single team. Do you know how many teams were out there when Paul Warlow was a rookie going, man, how did we miss that guy in the draft?
Paul Warlow. Okay.
That's the
example.
Even if he's not your starter, he's a good depth piece. How do you miss that in the draft? He would have been at least worth a good 5th round pick.
Yeah.
How do you miss guys like Devontae Freeman in the draft? He was a 4th round pick. So, I mean, every team's going to have a couple of guys like that are starting that probably shouldn't be, that were taken late in the draft. One of the best players in the NFL right now was a 5th round pick in Josh Norman for the Panthers. How did they miss him? It happens every year. How did teams miss Ricardo Allen? How did the Falcons miss Ricardo Allen last year? It happens every year. There's players every single year where you're just going to go, man, how did we miss that guy? And then there's other players where everybody says going into it, I don't give a damn if he killed that girl. If he really killed that girl. The La'el Collins situation. You need to take La'el Collins with a 7th round pick instead of some Jake Rogers kid out of Eastern Washington. And if he did kill the girl, then boom, you cut him. It's over. It's a 7th round pick. He didn't do anything outside of father her child. That's all he did.
Okay. I won't touch that one, but Dave, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say, how do you miss Croy Bierman? I really wanted to throw that one out. That was my major contribution. But, I think it's just... but, you're sort of guilty. We're stuck in our mindset. We see the team, we live the team, and we only see the guys that are, tearing it up because they are tearing it up. You're not looking at the hit rate team by team. You're not seeing, why did the Falcons pass on this guy necessarily? Why did they go with the guy they did? There may be a logical reason even if it doesn't work out. I think the Falcons have been guilty of some head-scratching moves. They've certainly missed some guys that I wish they had taken. But I think that is true. It is true of every team. So I think that, not every team is going to get Croy Bierman. That's all there is to it.
Which, for what he was, he actually wasn't a bad draft pick.
Not at all. No.
If every fifth-round pick wound up like Troy Bierman, teams would be a lot better. Just saying.
My answer to this question: how do we miss guys like Stephon Diggs? He doesn't play in the slot because the Falcons love their slow slot receivers. You know, he's a fast outside receiver, and they hate those types of players to put on their roster. That's why we missed them. No, but kidding aside, yeah, I mean, guys, you're gonna miss guys. That's what happens. That's why you got to keep drafting. You know, you just got to keep going up there and swinging, and hoping that you're gonna eventually land a Stephon Diggs or whoever, or Jamison Crowder, or you know, whoever else you want to say out there that was a hidden gem. Yeah, I mean that's the way it is. You know, you're not gonna. You know, I think what ends up happening every year when we get into the draft is we always, you know, there's this hype all around. Oh, if we get this one guy, everything's gonna get fixed. If we trade up for Jadeveon Clowney, all of our problems go away. And it's not true. Like, you know, the reality is, you know, it takes 22 guys. It takes, you know, 36 guys. It takes 53 guys to be a successful football team. But every year, you know, people get into this mindset like this one player is going to solve all of our issues. And if it happens to be, you know, Tom Brady or Russell Wilson or Matt Ryan, yeah, it works, you know, pretty good. But, you know, outside of a quarterback, you know, you look at Calvin Johnson. Calvin Johnson's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's played on a losing team his entire career. It didn't solve the Lions receiving, you know, passing games. They throw the ball, but they lose games, you know. Julio Jones didn't solve the Falcons' explosiveness problems. They were actually less explosive in the years that they were Julio Jones for some of those years with Julio Jones than they were with Michael Jenkins. So, you know, it's just the nature of the beast. Like, you're just going to miss guys, and you just got to keep cracking at it, and hopefully, you know, one day it's just going to all click, and you're going to find that Richard Sherman in the late round. You're going to find that Tom Brady. The Jamal Anderson, talking about the running back, who's a 7th-round pick. Those types of players don't grow on trees, but hopefully eventually you'll find one. All right. At Brosif929 asks, who would you have wanted to in a trade today?
Alex Mack. Because even though the team's not one player away, if you trade a 4th-round pick for Alex Mack and you restructure his contract, you've got a center who, 1, doesn't screw up snapping the ball, 2, played in Shanahan's scheme last year, and 3, is arguably the best center in the NFL. And he would have solidified the line. You don't have to worry about pass protection line calls being screwed up. You don't have to worry about him screwing up in pass protection the way James Stone or Mike Person might have. And you also don't have to worry about run blocking getting screwed up from the center position because Alex Mack is one of the best run blocking centers out there too. You basically solve every issue that the Falcons have had on the offensive line for the last 3 weeks, which are bad snaps, bad protection calls, and poor center play, with a guy who knows the scheme, is the best center in the league, and is quick and has the perfect scheme fit for Shanahan's scheme. So that's the guy that I would want.
Dave?
Personally, I would lean towards.
Did we lose Dave?
I think we lost Dave.
All right. Until we get Dave back, I guess I'll go. I would have gone for a wide receiver. If we were going to trade for anybody, probably Kendall Wright or Cordero Patterson, just because I think they have long-term potential. You know, I'm not a big fan of trading picks for older players that may retire into.
That's the kind of guy I would like.
I take back.
Dave, we lost you for like that entire long spiel.
We heard the beginning and the end.
Well, I'll put the Cliff Notes version together and say Mingo because he's young, he's athletic, he probably.
And Dave's gone.
Okay, all right. All right. Well, we'll start on the next question. Hopefully, we'll get Dave back again. But we heard his answer. He said Mingo.
Yeah, we got Mingo. So I can't blame him on Mingo.
Evan Birchfield asks, is the 49ers game a classic trap game, or do you expect us to roll over them?
I think the worst case scenario for the 49ers game is it ends up looking exactly like the Titans game. I think they'll win. It should be them rolling over them. But if they do somehow lose, it's like a 10-7 Falcons shot themselves in the foot kind of game. But considering Blaine Gabbert's the quarterback there, I doubt they lose.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like, I wouldn't call this a trap game. I feel like, as Scott said, it's basically should be a pretty easy matchup for the Falcons, just like that Titans game. They should roll. Again, as I said earlier, this is, the Titans and the Texans and the 49ers, even more so than the Jaguars, are probably the easiest games they're going to have the rest of the season. And so, if you're looking for a blowout, then this is probably your best chance of seeing that for the rest of this year. So, part of me expects it, and part of me is like, I've been expecting them to blow out these teams the last couple of weeks, so that hasn't really happened. So the other part of me doesn't expect it. So, on Sunday, if they blow out the 49ers, I'm like, I said we might do that, and if they don't, then I'm like, maybe they did that too. I don't know. You just never know with this team because, as people say, they shoot themselves in the foot. They have been playing, quote unquote, down to their opponents the last couple of weeks.
But if they play balls to the wall like they should, it could be another Houston Texans game.
Yeah. I'm glad that the 49ers gave us some bulletin board material if they need some extra motivation this week. So I feel like I feel a lot more confident that this will be a blowout than I probably would have yesterday, just because of that. All right. Doesn't look like we're getting Dave back, but let's move on to the next question from Evan Birchfield as well. A lot of people on Twitter keep saying Cam is better than Ryan. Can you tell them why they're wrong?
Because Cam's inconsistent. Ryan's inconsistent too, but even when Ryan's bad, he's a better passer than Cam is on a good day. Like Cam is probably one of the most high variance quarterbacks out there, and that he could be really, really good one day, but his really, really good days like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and no interceptions and rushing for like 45 yards and a touchdown. That's Cam's really good day. But when he's really, really bad and he throws 3 picks, the defense and the run game basically have to bail him out completely. So at a certain point, you just go, like last night, Cam was bailed out because of that defense and that run game. He was completely bailed out by a supporting cast. And yeah, he made a couple good passes late, but Cam wasn't why they won that game. That defense making key critical plays is why they won that game. So the whole, and people are going to use the wins thing to try and say Cam Newton's a better quarterback than Ryan. They're wrong. That team doesn't win because of Cam. Sometimes that team wins in spite of Cam. Don't get me wrong, he's a good quarterback. He's a leader on the field. But there are times when that team wins because despite Cam's 3 interceptions and fumble.
Well, I'm going to say the unpopular thing, but Cam, if you're judging by what was happening in 2015, Cam is a better quarterback than Matt Ryan right now. Now, if you're looking at their entire body of work, Ryan's better. If you're looking at what's probably likely going to happen over the next 5 years, Ryan will probably be better. But, I think both players have their strengths and weaknesses. I think going into this season, I rated Ryan like the 8th best quarterback in the league. I think I had Cam at like 13. But, all those guys in that range are about the same. They're not really that much better than one, than the other. And, I think the thing that Cam has going for him, when Cam is on his game, I think he can do a lot more things from a vertical standpoint than Matt Ryan can. But, like, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, again, if I was picking, if I was starting a team from scratch, I'd prefer Matt Ryan over Cam Newton. I would pick Matt Ryan over Cam Newton. But I think the gap between the two is probably not as big as a lot of people try to make it out to be. So, like, people can get into their Cam versus Ryan debates because that's what people do on Twitter, but it's not really worth your time. You're basically splitting hairs at the end of the day. So, at the end of the day, Cam's doing his thing. Ryan hopefully will do his thing, and they're inconsequential to one another. But, people want to get into arguments over who has the best quarterback that are pointless. Doesn't matter. So, yeah, I'm sorry if that's not the answer you were looking for, Evan. They're not wrong, but they are kind of wrong. So, there you go. All right, Evan's got one more for us. Or, no, he's got a couple more for us. Matchups you want to see in the 49ers-Falcons game.
I want to see Julio burn whoever they line up across from him. Just because it's fun. I want to see the Falcons throw a couple 40-yard bombs to Julio this week just because they can. Just because I know that they can. I want to see him throw a couple bombs to Hardy, too, because I know that they can. And they know that they can. Despite his slow 40, Hardy does have some good game speed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Julio going against, I think Tremaine Brock is a little underrated, but I don't think he can check Julio. And I don't know anything about Kenneth Acker.
He's bad. He's really bad.
I'm looking forward to that. And I want to see, I'm not assuming that Vic Beasley's going to have a huge game because he'll be going against Joe Staley for most of the night. I think he can beat Joe Staley. Don't get me wrong. I think he'll get a couple of pressures this game, maybe a hit or two. But I really want to see the rest of our pass rush sort of step up and say, okay, if Vic's not going to do anything, then, Babineau's going to be facing Jordan Devey. Like, if my Babineau's my boy, but if he doesn't dominate Jordan Devey, then I don't know. I might have to say something bad about Jonathan Babineau on next week's show. So, that'll be a first. So tune in, folks, for that if that happens. Yeah, so those are probably the main matchups I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, their offensive line is Falcons 2013 caliber right now. So I'm not really worried about him dominating Jordan Devey. I'm not worried about Cameron. I'm not worried about Eric Pierce or Marcus Martin. Joe Staley's still Joe Staley, but the rest of that line sucks so bad. It's one of the worst lines in the NFL because they have one NFL caliber player on it. And then they've got Alex Boone, who's solid, and then they've got no one good.
Yeah, what happened to Brandon Thomas?
I think he's hurt. He's got to be.
Yeah.
He's a good player. There's no reason why they wouldn't play him over the crap that they have right now, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, why isn't Brandon Thomas? But he's got to be hurt, yeah.
Unless he lost the job to Jordan Devey. But even then, like, why would Andrew Tiller play in this place? He's got to be hurt.
Huh.
Otherwise, send him down here. The Falcons could use a good, quick-footed offensive guard to replace Chester after this year. We'll trade Asamoah straight up for him. Screw it.
Huh, he's healthy. He's been practicing. He's just been inactive every week.
That doesn't even make sense.
He's had an ankle injury, but it hasn't kept him from practicing. Okay. All right. Evan Birchfield asks again, you'll probably cover this, but just in case, what is your opinion on Justin Hardy's first game?
I thought he had a solid open. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't going to be perfect. I mean, he did what he was supposed to do. You can't really get mad at a guy who goes out there, gets targeted a couple times, and makes a couple catches. As he gets more involved in the offense and as Ryan builds trust in him, I think we're going to see him as a better version of Harry Douglas long term. That slot guy who plays outside, plays inside, and they just let him go for it. I think he's a good fit for the offense. I think he's a good fit for Ryan. And I think that this week he could probably put up 5-6 catches for 100 yards if they target him a couple times. If they actually target him.
Yeah, I thought he had a good first game. By first game standards. Now, by Falcon number 2 receiver standards, he was a Pro Bowl player because he caught 2 passes. So I thought it was a good start for his career, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does more in the future, as hopefully him and Ryan start to build a little bit more trust and confidence and whatnot. All right, our last question comes from Evan Birchfield. Now that we're halfway through the season, any opinions on our future 2015 opponents?
I mean, the 49ers should be a win. After the bye, playing the Colts at home with an extra week of preparation and with a lot to prove, I could see the Colts being a big win. The Vikings, the very next week, I could see a win, but it would have to be a hard-fought battle. That's probably going to be the toughest game on the Falcons' schedule outside of those Panthers games. The Buccaneers in Tampa, Atlanta's going to be wanting revenge from the first game this year. As long as they clean it up, that should be a win. They'll probably lose in Carolina, causing a bunch of people to go, oh my God, the sky is falling. Then they'll destroy the Jaguars because the Jaguars blow. Then they'll get revenge on the Panthers at home, and then they'll get revenge on the Saints at home. I could very easily see this team going 3-3 in the division and losing one game out of it and being 12-4 by the end of the season. I think that's being very realistic with this team.
Yeah, I think they're probably, if we're being realistic, they'll probably drop one to Carolina. But outside of
Carolina.
Yeah, no, I think outside of that, they're all winnable games. They'll probably slip up and lose a game. Probably the Vikings are probably the next closest game, and maybe the Colts figure something out because I think they have a bye coming up as well. So maybe they get their stuff together after they play the Broncos and give the Falcons a real run for their money. I feel like my opinion hasn't changed on really any of these teams. Like the Colts are, based off of last week, are playing better than what they looked at the start of the season, and that was sort of what my expectation was at the start of the year. They wouldn't be as bad as they were, but it is what it is. Like we have a soft schedule. I feel like we could probably go 6-2 in the second half of the season, maybe even better than that. And if we go 4-4, then that's not a big deal either. Just as long as they're more, competitive in those other extra losses, then that's fine as well. So yeah. All right, that is it for tonight's show. We appreciate. Oh wait, I'm looking at it, and that seems like we got a couple more.
Let's answer them. Right. Can't keep them waiting.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's not a question worth answering. Okay, hold on, I got one. All right, we got one from Dustin. It's been over 3 weeks since we've seen that Ryan to Julio deep ball connection. When does Shanahan go back to it?
Hopefully this week. Probably should be going to it the third play of the game. Run it with Devontae, run it with Devontae, play action, throw it deep. Hope Julio's covered by Acker, and then just go from there.
Yeah, a lot of speculation that there's a secret Matt Ryan injury going on, and I don't really buy into it, but it does seem like they're playing very conservative for some reason. So if we don't see it this week, then it just adds more fuel to that fire. So I'm expecting it this week, and if it doesn't happen, I'll expect it the week after that. And if it doesn't, like they got to start taking shots down the field. So hopefully it's gonna come at some point. We got one more from Dustin. He asked, with Atlanta scraping by wins and losing 2 divisional games, is it almost time to hit the panic button if they lose to the 49ers?
I mean, if they lose to the 49ers, yeah, but it depends on how they lose. I doubt they lose to the 49ers, truly. But even then, they'd still be 6-3 going into the bye, which is about 2 games better than I thought they'd be.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the panic button. I just think, the thing I've said the last couple of games, it's like, how many mediocre performances does this team need to have before you start believing that they're mediocre? So I guess, yeah, if they lose to the 49ers, I'll be more firmly in my belief that they're mediocre, as opposed to this secretly good team that just hasn't played like it in 5 games. So is that a panic button? That this is an 8-8 team that's playing a 12-4 schedule. Is that something to panic over? I don't know. But yeah, if they lost to the 49ers, that's probably when I would start to believe that they're closer to average than they are to this juggernaut. But I don't know if that's panicking over. That's just kind of, we have what I've been saying, last year, that we don't really have great talent, and you're going to kind of get average results. And
it's a first-year coach, and the first year of building a roster for that coach, just making it to the playoffs would be worth it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's nothing to panic over. I mean, it really isn't. Like, I know there's a lot of Falcon fans out there that really thought that the last 2 years this team was, going to be right back in the Super Bowl hunt, and that they weren't. They would get a new coach, and then all of a sudden they'd be right back in the Super Bowl hunt. But, that probably isn't reality. So, you just got to have to, if they lose to the 49ers, you just got to have to start tempering your expectations just a little bit, So I don't know if that you got to go into panic mode over it. That if they lose to the 49ers, then that Colts game is probably a lot closer to 50-50 than sort of probably what people are assuming right now, that we'll beat the Colts pretty easily. So, all right, now that is our show. We appreciate Dustin for the last second questions. He seems to ask those every week. Guess he doesn't get the inspiration until he sees our faces on YouTube. Guys, you can send in your early questions or late questions using the hashtag Falcons mailbag. You can send them to either me or Scott. I am at FalcFan. Scott is at Karasik PFS. You can use the show's Twitter handle, which is at FalconsPFC. Rate us on iTunes. There might be a minor issue with this week's episode getting up there, but I will see if I can figure that out. I have to take more responsibility and massage this iTunes feed a little bit more personally, but I'll figure it out. And we'll be back next week to talk about the 49er game, and we'll be talking about, or at least I will be talking about, all the chicken wings I'm going to eat during the bye week to fill that Falcon-sized hole in my stomach. And Scott will do something. I don't know.
We'll talk about what needs to be fixed during the bye week.
Yeah. All right, guys. We appreciate it, and we'll be back next week.